Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
If you have ever had that one person in your life who can burn every bridge and still expect you to send a boat, then you already know exactly who my brother Travis is, and let me tell you. I had been swimming across those burning rivers for him for way too damn long. Travis was the golden boy when we were growing up, the charming mess who could sweet-talk his way out of anything, from a broken vase to a DUI. While I was the one always holding the mop or bailing him out with the last few crumpled 20s I had hidden in my purse. It was not that I did not love him. Blood is supposed to be thicker than water, or so they say, but after 36 years of excuses, lies, and endless second chances, that blood felt more like molasses, heavy and suffocating, dragging me down into places I should have walked away from years ago. The last straw, or so I thought, came when Travis showed up at my house one rainy Wednesday afternoon, grinning like the wolf who just found the fattest lamb in the field, asking if he could borrow my Harley. Now, let me paint the picture for you real clear. This bike was not just some hunk of metal to me. I had spent 4 years restoring her from the ground up after a brutal divorce that left me questioning every decision I had ever made, from who I married to what kind of creamer I put in my coffee. That Harley was my freedom, my therapy, my proof that I could build something beautiful out of the wreckage of my own damn life. And here comes Travis, smelling faintly of cheap beer and even cheaper cologne, batting those baby blues at me like he was still 17 and asking to borrow Dad's truck for a weekend. I should have said no. Every bone in my body screamed to say no. Hell, even the dog gave me that side eye that only dogs can pull off, the one that says, "Lady, you sure you want to do this?" But guilt is a funny thing, slippery and persistent, worming its way into your spine until you find yourself handing over the keys with a half-hearted, "Be careful," already knowing you are gonna regret it. Travis hooped like a kid on Christmas morning, hopped on that bike like he owned it, and peeled out of my driveway with a roar that shook the windows. He did not even make it 2 nights. It was about 10:30 when the call came, one of those calls that jolts you out of sleep and leaves your heart pounding against your ribs like a prisoner trying to escape. It was not Travis on the line, no, that would have been too responsible. It was a deputy from the county sheriff's office, telling me my bike had been involved in a collision on Route 17 and that I might want to come down and take a look at what was left of it. My stomach dropped to somewhere around my ankles, but I managed to croak out a thank you and hang up without throwing the phone across the room. By the time I got to the scene, Travis was already sitting on the tailgate of a tow truck, smoking a cigarette like he had not a care in the goddamn world. The bike was another story. Twisted metal, shredded tires, a gas tank that looked like it had been kicked in by a mule. I barely recognized her, my beautiful Harley, reduced to junkyard scrap because my brother thought it would be fun to show off for his drinking buddies. I walked up to him, cold rage curling in my gut, and asked the only question that mattered. What the hell happened? Travis shrugged, flicking his cigarette into the gravel like some half-assed movie villain, and said, "Relax, it ain't a big deal. It's just a bike. Just a bike." I could feel something inside me crack then, a fine, hairline fracture that had been building for years, and now it was splitting wide open, letting out every hurt, every betrayal, every goddamn broken promise he had ever handed me like it was a gift. I clenched my fists, feeling my nails bite into my palms, and asked, with a voice so calm it scared even me, "And how do you plan on paying for this, Travis?" That is when he laughed. Not just a chuckle or a smirk, but a full, belly-deep laugh that echoed off the trees and made the deputy glance over from his paperwork. Travis wiped his eyes, looked me dead in the face, and said, "Good luck getting anything from me." He said it like it was a joke, like I was the biggest fool in the world for even asking. Maybe once, a long time ago, he would have been right. Maybe once, I would have thrown my hands up, cried into my pillow, and eaten the cost because that is what you do for family, right? But not anymore. I nodded slowly, feeling an icy calm settle over me, the kind of calm that comes not from peace, but from knowing exactly what is about to happen and exactly how much it is going to hurt the other person when you finally stop playing the fool. I smiled, a real, genuine smile, the first one I had given Travis in years, and turned on my heel without another word, walking back to my car while the deputy called out behind me to sign some paperwork. What Travis did not know, what he would soon find out, was that I had already filed the paperwork weeks ago. And the papers were just waiting. Just like me. Waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When people talk about family, they like to dress it up in words like loyalty and unconditional love, but if you strip all the hallmark slogans away and look at the raw, bleeding truth, sometimes family is just the people who know exactly where to stick the knife. Growing up with Travis was like living with a tornado that smelled faintly of gasoline and broken promises, and somewhere along the line, I stopped expecting him to change and just started bracing for the next storm. It had always been this way, me chasing after the disasters he left behind, trying to patch up the mess before it could spread too far and catch everything else in flames. When we were kids, Travis broke our mom's favorite antique lamp and blamed it on me, standing there with his wide, innocent eyes while she scolded me to tears. When we were teenagers, he borrowed my car without asking, wrecked it into a mailbox, and told everyone I had left the parking brake off. The worst part was not even the lies themselves. It was the way everyone always seemed so eager to believe him, the way they saw the mess, and automatically assumed I must have been the one who caused it. Later, when we were both adults pretending to have it figured out, Travis graduated to bigger and more expensive screw-ups. There was the time he took out a loan using our father's name, forging the signature so well that it took months to untangle, while he shrugged and said it was no big deal, that Dad would have helped him anyway if he had just asked. There was the year he wrecked his third truck in a DUI, and somehow our mother ended up mortgaging her house to pay his legal fees because family sticks together. That phrase stuck to me like oil ever since, slippery and impossible to wash off, even when every part of me knew that what they called love was just a prettier word for enabling. Still, for a long time, I kept letting it happen, because that is what you are supposed to do, right? You take the hits, you tell yourself they did not mean it, you pray that next time will be different even though deep down you already know it won't. Travis could light the house on fire and call it an accident, and there I would be, standing in the ashes with a damn hose in my hands, wondering why it always seemed to end this way. The thing is, when you start measuring your life by the number of second chances you have given out, eventually you run out of fingers, then toes, and then you just stop counting altogether. Back then, Travis had borrowed about 15 motorcycles from me over the years. Well, maybe it was more like 3, but who's counting? I say that half joking, but there's a bite under the humor, a truth that tasted like rust in the back of my throat. Each scratch on my bike, each dent and chip and cracked mirror, was a new line written into the history of my failures to say no. So, when Travis showed up a month ago, slick with charm and smelling faintly of desperation, asking to borrow my Harley for just a few days, I smiled sweetly and told him sure, no problem. But what he did not know was that I had already started making plans, and this time, the damage would not be measured in cracked chrome or broken spokes. I had been talking to a lawyer for weeks, one of those ruthless types who could find a loophole in a nun's diary, and together we had started laying the groundwork. It was not even about the bike anymore, not really. It was about finally drawing the line in the sand that Travis could not just stumble across and charm his way out of. I had documented everything, from the texts he sent begging to borrow it, to the casual yeah, I'll take care of it voice messages that reeked of his usual brand of half-ass promises. I took pictures of the bike in perfect condition, logged the mileage, saved every insurance policy and maintenance record like little bullets I could load into my legal gun later. For once in my life, I was not going to walk into the fire without a plan to put it out. It sounds cold, maybe even a little petty when I lay it out like that, but you have to understand. Years of being the fallback, the scapegoat, the afterthought. had hardened something inside me that I did not even know was there until it was already sharp enough to cut. It was not about revenge, not really. It was about survival, about finally refusing to drown in someone else's damn flood. So, when Travis wrecked my bike that night, he thought he was pulling the same old con, thought he could grin and shrug and let the wreckage settle into my lap like every other mess he had ever made. What he did not realize was that the trap had already been set weeks before his hand even touched my keys. I watched him at the accident scene, lighting that cigarette with his usual smirk, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time, power, cold and clean, rushing through my veins like ice water. I was not going to yell. I was not going to cry. I was going to let the system do what I should have done a long time ago. The papers had already been filed. The evidence had already been compiled. All I had to do now was wait for him to step right into the fire he had built all by himself, and for once, I was not going to be the one holding the damn hose. By the time Travis swaggered into my driveway asking to borrow my Harley, I was already playing a completely different game than he thought we were playing, and the beauty of it was he had no damn clue. It was not just bitterness fueling me either, even though God knows there was plenty of that stockpiled like old dynamite waiting for a spark. It was the sharp, bright realization that I had wasted too much of my life picking up after him. And if I was ever going to stop bleeding from his messes, I needed to treat this like the war it had become. The first move I made was simple and almost laughably obvious: start a paper trail so detailed it could make an insurance adjuster weep. When Travis sent me a text begging for the bike, I responded in writing, making sure he clearly stated he understood it was a loan and that any damages would be on him. I had him agree to it twice, once by text and once over a casual phone call I recorded with a little app my lawyer friend had suggested I download. That little app, by the way, might have been the best free thing I ever found besides a half-eaten Snickers bar under my car seat one particularly desperate afternoon. Jess, my best friend since the 3rd grade and the only person besides my lawyer who knew the full plan, nearly choked on her latte when I explained the setup to her one night over drinks at our usual dive bar. She leaned across the sticky table, slapped her palm down hard enough to make the beer bottles jump, and said, "Jesus, you're thinking 3 moves ahead like some biker queen Batman out here." I grinned and raised my glass to that because honestly, it felt damn good to finally be the one setting the traps instead of falling into them. The second move was trickier, more personal, and a hell of a lot more satisfying. I installed a small GPS tracker on the Harley, hidden so cleverly that even if Travis had been sober, which he almost never was for long, he would not have noticed it unless he stripped the entire seat down to the bolts. That little device logged every mile he rode, every backroad detour, every late-night stop at bars that served shots strong enough to make your teeth curl. And oh, the places he went. If I had not been so furious, I might have almost admired the sheer reckless poetry of it. I did not stop there. Every time Travis mentioned riding with his so-called crew, a bunch of overgrown frat boys with more tattoos than brain cells, I quietly contacted a couple of their girlfriends, women I knew had an axe to grind against Travis for various reasons, and asked if they would be willing to be witnesses if it ever came to that. Turns out, revenge breeds alliances faster than rabbits, and before long I had a nice tidy list of people ready to swear on a Bible that they saw Travis riding drunk, popping wheelies, and generally treating my bike like it was a stunt prop in a low-budget action movie. Every move he made, every lie he told, every stupid, reckless choice was another nail I quietly hammered into the coffin he did not even know he was lying in yet. It sounds cruel, maybe even a little monstrous when I spell it out like that, but you have to understand, this was not just about a motorcycle. This was about years of disrespect, about a lifetime of cleaning up after a man who thought love meant never having to say he was sorry. So when Travis wrecked the Harley that night, I did not scream or cry or throw a fit. I stood there in the glow of the tow truck's lights, looking at the bent frame and shattered mirrors, and I felt the strange, almost electric calm settle over me. Everything was happening exactly the way it needed to. The damage was just the cherry on top of the mountain of evidence I had already built, a mountain tall enough to bury Travis if he tried to weasel out of responsibility the way he always had before. The very next morning, after he laughed in my face and told me good luck getting anything from him, the sheriff's office called him at the crack of dawn. Not just some bored deputy either. This was a full-blown official summons, complete with charges of property damage and negligence because in this state, it turns out, if you borrow something and destroy it through gross misconduct, you are legally on the hook whether you like it or not. Especially when the owner has been quietly assembling enough evidence to make a prosecutor drool. I sat at my kitchen table sipping coffee, watching the sun climb up over the pine trees, and I imagined Travis's smug little world cracking apart as he listened to the officer explain just how deep a hole he had dug for himself. I wondered if he would finally realize that for once, the mess he was drowning in was one he could not lie or charm or joke his way out of. I doubted it, but still, it was a nice thought to savor, like a rich piece of cake you know you should not eat, but enjoy anyway. Later that afternoon, Jess called to ask if I had heard from him yet, and when I told her no, she just laughed and said, "He's probably still sitting there trying to figure out how the hell you outplayed him." I laughed too, a real laugh, deep and full and clean, the kind that felt like a spring rain washing away years of dirt. I did not know exactly what was going to happen next, but I knew one thing for damn sure. For the first time in a long time, I was not the one left holding the bag. Travis could run, he could deny, he could scream about betrayal all he wanted, but the truth was waiting for him in black and white, and there was not a damn thing he could do to change it. And the best part was, he had not even seen the court papers yet. Thanksgiving has always been a loaded gun in my family, the kind of gathering where you smile through your teeth and pass the mashed potatoes like you're not thinking about flipping the entire table over the next stupid thing someone says. It had been years since we had anything close to a peaceful holiday, and somehow, even knowing what I had planned, I found myself hoping for a miracle as I drove up the long gravel driveway to my parents' house that Thursday afternoon. There is something about the smell of roasting turkey and burnt pies that makes you nostalgic enough to forget, at least for a moment, how much damage the people you love can do. When I walked in carrying a pumpkin pie that looked way better than it tasted, Travis was already there, sprawled out in Dad's recliner like he owned the place, beer in one hand and that same shit-eating grin plastered across his face. He did not even bother to stand up, just nodded at me like I was the help, and I knew right then and there that he was going to make this as ugly as possible. He had already been running his mouth to anyone who would listen, painting me as some heartless, vindictive monster who was trying to ruin his life over a stupid piece of junk. The worst part was, some of it had stuck. I could see it in the way Mom gave me that tight, worried smile, the one that said she loved me but also maybe half believed whatever version of the story Travis had fed her. Dad barely even looked up from the football game, grunting a hello that sounded more like a warning. Even Aunt Carol, who had once threatened to skin Travis alive for scratching her new SUV, just patted my arm awkwardly and said something about how family forgives, sweetheart, like it was just that easy. Like forgiveness was a pie you could slice up and pass around the table without anyone choking on it. Dinner started off tense but civil, the way a storm does when it is still gathering strength, and for a little while, I let myself believe I could get through it without lighting the fuse. We passed the rolls and made small talk about the weather and how bad the traffic was this year, pretending like there was not a powder keg sitting right in the middle of the mashed potatoes. But Travis, being Travis, could not leave well enough alone. He started in small, jabbing little comments about how some people just did not know how to let things go, about how sad it was when folks held grudges over material things instead of valuing family, his words slick with that fake innocence he wore like armor. At first, I ignored him, carving my turkey with mechanical precision, but he kept pushing, kept needling, his voice rising in that familiar pattern that always ended with someone yelling and someone else crying. Finally, he said it, loud enough for the whole table to hear. You know, if Emily spent half as much time caring about people as she does about her damn bike, maybe she wouldn't be so miserable. For a second, the whole room froze, forks halfway to mouths, mouths halfway to words they were too polite to say out loud. Mom dropped her spoon with a clatter, and Dad shifted uncomfortably, but nobody said a damn thing. Nobody defended me. Nobody told him to shut the hell up. It was just like always. Travis caused the wreck, and I got handed the broom and the dustpan. I set my fork down slowly, wiped my mouth with my napkin, and reached into my purse with a calm so cold it could have frozen the gravy on the table. I pulled out the envelope, thick and white and heavy with all the weight of the months I had spent preparing for this exact moment, and I stood up. "Travis," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a blade, "since you were so concerned about my priorities, I thought I'd help you with yours." I walked around the table, past the green bean casserole and the cranberry sauce shaped like a can, and dropped the envelope into his lap. For a moment, he just stared at it, confusion flickering across his face, and then he ripped it open like he thought it was going to be another one of the lottery tickets he always begged off Dad every Christmas. Instead, it was a summons. Official. Irrefutable. Stamped and notarized with the full power of the court behind it. Along with it, stapled neatly, were the photos I had taken of the Harley before and after, the text messages where he had agreed to responsibility, the statements from witnesses who had seen him ride it drunk and reckless. Every piece of evidence laid out as clearly as the food on the table. The smirk slid off his face like ice melting under a blowtorch. His hands shook slightly as he flipped through the pages, the blood draining from his face until he looked almost gray. For once, Travis did not have a single clever thing to say, no smartass comment to throw like a grenade into the middle of the room. The silence stretched out long and awkward, broken only by the ticking of the ancient grandfather clock in the hallway and the soft clink of someone's fork dropping onto a plate. Mom was crying now, soft hiccuping sobs that she tried to smother with her napkin, and Dad stared at the television like if he just focused hard enough on the game, none of this would be happening. Finally, Travis looked up at me, his mouth working like he wanted to say something, anything, but no words came out. His eyes flicked back down to the photos, the undeniable proof of just how thoroughly I had cornered him, and for the first time in a very long time, I saw real fear there. Not the kind of fear you feel when you get caught sneaking a beer in the garage, not the fear of being grounded or lectured, but the kind of bone-deep fear that comes when you realize you have finally run out of chances, and there is no one left to blame but yourself. I stood there for a moment longer, letting him sit with it, letting everyone sit with it, the uncomfortable, ugly truth that maybe love is not enough when it is always one person doing the bleeding and the other doing the cutting. Then I picked up my purse, slung it over my shoulder, and walked out the door into the crisp November air without looking back once. The courthouse looked smaller than I remembered, crouched against the gray morning sky like a stubborn old man daring the world to challenge him, and as I pulled into the parking lot, I realized my hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had gone bone white. Part of me wanted to turn around, drive away, pretend that none of this was happening, but that part of me had been calling the shots for far too long, and today was not its day. Inside, the courtroom smelled like old books and cold coffee, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with that particular, nerve-jangling hum that seemed perfectly designed to make you feel like something was about to go terribly wrong. I sat at the plaintiff's table, papers neatly organized in front of me, and waited for Travis to show up, knowing he would be late, knowing he would swagger in like this was just another minor inconvenience he could bullshit his way out of. Sure enough, 15 minutes after the judge had already taken the bench, Travis slouched through the double doors wearing a wrinkled suit that looked like it had been dug out of the back seat of his car. He shot me a look as he passed, a mixture of smugness and simmering resentment, and for a moment, a flicker of doubt wormed its way into my chest, whispering that maybe I was the villain here. Maybe I was the one destroying what little family we had left over something as small and stupid as a pile of twisted metal. But then I thought of every time he had lied to me, Every time he had left me holding the bag while he danced away without a scratch, and I felt that doubt shrivel up and die like a weed scorched by the sun. The proceedings themselves were mercifully short. My lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Carla who wore sensible shoes and had the patience of a saint, presented the mountain of evidence we had collected with cool, ruthless efficiency. Every text, every recorded phone call, every GPS ping that showed Travis's drunken joyrides up and down the back roads, all laid out in stark, undeniable clarity. Travis, for his part, looked like he was still operating under the delusion that he could charm his way out of this, tossing out half-hearted excuses about faulty brakes and misleading directions, but the judge was not buying it. Neither was anyone else in that room. After a brief deliberation that felt more like a formality than anything else, the judge ruled in my favor, awarding me full damages for the bike, court fees, and additional penalties for reckless endangerment. It should have felt like victory. It should have felt like justice. Instead, as I stood there accepting the court's judgment, all I felt was an aching, hollow space opening up inside me, as if winning had cost me something I would not be able to replace. Outside the courthouse, the sky had cleared and the sun was shining down in that sharp, almost cruel way it does in late November, when the air is cold enough to make your teeth ache. I walked across the parking lot to my new Harley, the one I had bought just a week before with the insurance payout and a little extra scraped together from my savings. She was beautiful, sleek, powerful, every inch a symbol of freedom and resilience, and yet, as I swung my leg over the seat, I could not shake the feeling that she carried the weight of everything I had lost to get here. I started the engine, the low, throaty rumble filling the air, and as I adjusted my helmet, I caught sight of Travis standing across the lot, half-shadowed by the overhang of the courthouse entrance. He was watching me, hands shoved deep into his pockets, shoulders hunched against the cold, and for once, there was no smirk on his face, no lazy grin or cocky swagger. There was just nothing, an emptiness that mirrored the one blooming quietly inside my own chest. We stared at each other for a long moment, neither of us moving, neither of us speaking, and in that silence, I felt the finality of it settle over me like a heavy, irreversible truth. There was no coming back from this, no apology big enough to bridge the canyon that had opened between us. I had won and he had lost, and somewhere in that simple, brutal equation, we had both ended up broken in ways that no payout could ever fix. I revved the engine once, more out of habit than anything else, and Travis flinched slightly at the sound, a small, involuntary movement that somehow hurt worse than anything he could have said. For a wild, stupid second, I wanted to kill the engine, walk over to him, throw my arms around him and sob into his jacket like we were kids again, like love alone could heal the jagged, festering wounds we had carved into each other. But I did not. Instead, I shifted into gear, pulled out of the lot, and rode away without looking back, the wind cold against my face, the road unwinding before me like a question I would never quite know how to answer. Because the truth was, I had no idea if what I had done was justice or revenge, no idea if I had finally freed myself or just traded one kind of prison for another. Maybe the line between the two was thinner than I had ever realized, so thin you did not even know you had crossed it until you were already too far gone. Maybe there are some debts you cannot collect without losing a piece of yourself along the way. And maybe, just maybe, some victories are nothing more than the start of a different kind of war.